Welcome to Cut Through the Noise with Dave Toronto, bringing you the truth behind the headlines in business and current events. Let's go.
So the topic of today's discussion with Tyrone is called Facing an Uncertain Future Like a Warrior. You know, we've got the pandemic, a contested presidential election, a shaky economy, and all to add to the uncertainty and anxiety levels that many of us have never experienced. So in this episode, Tyrone and I are going to talk about that. And Tyrone, for those of you who don't know him, is a karate champion and a meditation coach. And he's going to talk to us about how his warrior Zen approach to mindfulness is just what all of us need to face this uncertain future. So, Tyrone, thanks for being with me today.
Well, thank you. That's great. And a great intro. And great to see you on the screen. We've talked many times on the phone, and this is our first time face-to-face. So it's great to see you.
You as well, and like I said to you before you started recording, I actually shaved before this, so I have no makeup on. So this is what I look like, and it's tough. And you and I have talked about this before, by the way. Both of us are reluctant participants when it comes to being on video. So here we go. Let's see what happens, right?
Yeah.
So what is mindfulness? If you just walk me through it, walk the listeners through it. How would you define mindfulness?
Well, it would be unfair of me not to go back 2,500 years to the foundations of mindfulness practice. First of all, Warrior Zen mindfulness, the practice that I teach, is a secular training. It's not a religious training. So on that note, I would like to go back to the foundations where a gentleman named Siddhartha Gautama, who is known as the Buddha.
Yep.
Buddha means awakened one, someone who has woken up. He basically tried everything in the book to find some solution to personal suffering, anxiety, depression, uncertainty, all of those things that he saw as a very wealthy young man, a prince of India. Saw that people were suffering no matter how much money they had. They were just still suffering. So what he did was he went to the Himalayan mountains and he did everything he possibly could to figure out, well, how can I end this suffering, right? And he found nothing worked. And he did it for years and years. He tried every single trick in the book from all the different gurus that he had and different techniques and stuff like that. Nothing worked. And so he started practicing a different thing, which is basically the foundation of mindfulness, which was sitting meditation. He stripped all the unnecessary stuff away, all the ritual, all the, reliance on gods, reliance on, superstition and, all kinds of stuff, and just boiled it down to sitting with the mind. And practiced that for many, many years. And the famous story is he became enlightened under the Bodhi tree. So the tree of enlightenment. And from there, he taught his practice of simply sitting on a cushion, following the breath and getting to know yourself, giving yourself the space to meet the present moment, and to experience the present moment without judgment. So his teaching was to train the mind and the body together as one, to experience the spaciousness of our existence, not the narrowness that we have when we're stuck inside our mind, but the spaciousness of our true existence, which is unlimited. It's limitless. We have a universe full of stars. We have oceans, we have mountains, and all of that exists, whether this body lives or dies. So opening yourself to experiencing the spaciousness, the bigness of the universe without judgment is what his original teaching was about. So let's fast forward to probably the 1950s, late 50s, when Buddhism, or what became known as Zen, came to the United States with a gentleman who went to San Francisco named Suzuki Shunryu. And he was one of the first significant Zen teachers in the United States who created a very big Zendo or ashram and had a big following. And he taught it in the traditional religious sense. And it took off. I mean, Zen became very big. Zen meditation became very big in the 60s, 50s with the Beat Generation, 60s with the hippies, 70s with the rock bands started using it for their practices. 80s, business people started using it when they discovered the Book of Five Rings by a gentleman named Miyamoto Musashi, who was a Zen teacher and sword master. And Wall Street started adopting the teachings of the Book of Five Rings, which is rooted in meditation and Zen practice, and started using the focus and the discipline and the practices that Musashi taught in that book to improve their ability as business people. And right around then, we had the interest peaked up with Harvard and MIT trying to see, well, this meditation thing seems to be quite powerful. Can we measure that? Can we actually understand what this is about? And they went into a lot of different studies and are still doing studies to this day. So that's a quick history. And then let me tell you a little bit quickly about my background. I trained in karate from the age of 12, karate and jiu-jitsu, and I had 3 principal teachers. And these teachers all believed that meditation was a critical part of peak performance in martial arts. So as I started competing in the first national tournaments in Ireland, and where I became national junior champion and then went on to become national senior champion of the All-Ireland, and then became captain of the All-Ireland team, the international team. In order to improve my performance and to overcome fear, which, I'm not a natural athlete and I'm not a natural fighter. So getting over the fear and the uncertainty of a fighting match, you need something else. And my teachers always taught me Zen meditation, sitting on the cushion, emptying the mind, focusing on the center, and getting in touch with one's breathing. So I used it originally as a way to improve my karate practice. And then later on, as I became more experienced at international competition, became European champion twice, competed in Japan in the World Championships in 2001, placed 6th in the world, the only non-Japanese person to place within the top 10. I can put my abilities in that area not down to physical, but down to the practice of meditation. So as I developed my ad agency business throughout the 80s and 90s, again, I tried to use mindfulness practices as a way of being more creative, to really get the best out of creativity. And with my teams, the various teams that I've worked with, from my own personal companies to other agencies where I've worked in New York and Boston and Ireland, helping creative teams to perform better, I've used mindfulness practices as a way to put the key in the lock, to open the mind to what is the present moment, where creativity comes from. You can't create creativity without being truly present. So I'm sorry for talking so long, but give me a chance to explain mindfulness and I get excited about it. So
I can tell. And I think you promised me before we started that we could have a virtual fight by the end of this. Is that true? Does that still stand? I just need a weapon because I don't particularly want to get in the ring with you. Well, I appreciate the background. Let me. I hear. I know a lot of people. So I coach people for a living too, and then you've also got a mindfulness coaching practice,
yeah.
and I am a little bit judgmental. To put it on the table about other coaches, and not all, but I do get judgmental because I do see many who they're just hanging up a shingle. You know, they might have gone through a certificate program, or they went through a class, and all of a sudden they're a coach, and they don't necessarily live what they're coaching. And I suppose that's okay. I mean, as long as you know what you're talking about, I guess it doesn't matter if you do it or you don't. What's interesting to me about you is the martial arts background, and it's your life. It's not something you teach. It's something that you are, and you've been that. It's not a new thing. And do you have any thoughts on that? Am I being unfair when I look at? And I guess I don't dwell on what else is out there, but I'm aware that not every coach or mindfulness instructor is effective, right? I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're a coach, and what impressed me about your approach to coaching is that you're rooted in practicality. In other words, you don't bring a theory to it. You bring your own personal experience of business and relationships to what you do with companies and with individual business people. And to your point, I think specifically in the mindfulness industry, there is a lot of people who have done these mindfulness teacher courses. They paid a couple of $1,000s. They've learned all the basic architecture of simple mindfulness practices, and they hang out their shingle. And, they're probably not doing any harm. But the thing about mindfulness training is that there is so much unseen and unspeakable that you need a teacher who's already walked the walk in order for that teacher to know where to point you.
Yep.
Because without that, you're really only speaking words and not leading by example. And so I think the 10,000 hour rule applies to pretty much everything. Mm-hmm. If you're going to be a great basketball player, well, you better be committed to spending 10,000 hours learning how to play basketball. The same with the Beatles. I mean, many people thought the Beatles just splashed onto the scene and were that great from the start. But what people didn't know is they spent 10,000 hours in Hamburg, late night in all these smoky clubs learning their craft. So, and that goes for anyone who's accomplished at anything. It takes that long. And while I think it's great people have launched a journey into teaching mindfulness, I think to do it without actually committing to practicing it is inauthentic.
Yeah. Well, so you're referencing Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell.
I am,
a lot of what you just said is referenced in his book. And that's what's interesting about this to me. And that's, you talk about practicality. In my opinion, there are no quick fixes in life or in business or in sports. But I do think I think we live in an environment that is committed to quick fixes. And you talk about anxiety and depression back 2,500 years ago when Buddha was coming up with these ideas, for example. And yet those same things are just as relevant today, maybe more so. And yet the tactics and strategies associated with mindfulness still apply, but there are plenty of quick fixes that really aren't solving those problems being offered today. Any thoughts on that? When I say that, not to say that nobody should have medicine, but sometimes I feel like medicine is the quick fix, as if anxiety or depression or sadness is wrong. Mm. And so therefore we give you this. Before maybe we've tried to work through something. Is this a slippery slope?
Well, first of all, I think that anyone who has, diagnosed depression or anxiety should be talking to a doctor. And I think there is a place for medication when people are in a really deep hole
Right.
You can't expect them to, start meditating on the cushion and devote, an hour a day for the next 3 years to come out the other side of it. It would be beautiful if that could happen in 1 or 2 sitting meditation sessions, but that isn't how it works. So I think it's very important for people suffering from any diagnosable mental illness to have the proper care. And that includes, in many cases, pharmacological care.
Mm-hmm.
Pharmacological care, whatever that word is.
That sounds about right.
So having said that, I do want to say that as a society, and you just said this a moment ago, we do want quick fixes. We tend to want an answer right now, and we're a consumer-based society, so we tend to consume rather than savor. And I think that the trouble with that approach to mindfulness is that you have the desire to get fixed right now. So a lot of people have made some money on apps and, coaching and, techniques that really amount to what I believe is a relaxation therapy. So you take deep relaxation therapy and you get a quick fix or an elixir, which lasts for a couple of hours or maybe till the next morning. And then you're confronted again with the same things that got you into the place where you sought that fix. So you remember how I was saying how we get trapped in this narrow space here. Well, any teaching or any practice that doesn't get you out of that space and into experiencing the spaciousness of our existence without the ego dialogue going on, the constant self analysis or questioning whether this is the right way or that's the right way, or what is the right solution, or how do I fix this, or did this happen? Oh my God, So we tend to be like we're either in the past or in the future.
Yeah.
We're either worrying about what happened before, or we're worrying what may never happen at all in the future, right? So that's the problem, right? You can't. How do you get out of that?
Well, so I wrote some notes before we started talking, and I talk about this all the time. I have dwelling in the past or worrying about the future.
Yeah.
And maybe that's where the ego comes in, right? Because, there are lots and lots of people, and not that I've never dwelled or worried. It's not like, as a younger person, I spent way too much, embarrassingly too much time in that space. As an older person, not old, but an older person, I almost refuse to spend time in those spaces.
Yeah.
I just want to be here.
Right.
That's it. I want to be right here, and that's it, because the past is done and the future hasn't happened.
Right.
And yet not be naive to either, and not underestimate the impact of the past or maybe the impact of the future. But the reality is all you have is right now, this conversation right now. Right. And you're making a difference with it. And I think that's where the ego, and you tell me if I'm wrong, you're more versed on this than me, but the ego to me is when a person just can't see the world beyond their own thoughts or how they look in a certain situation or who said what about them. And I without being disrespectful to people, because I'm one, we're not that important. Right. At the end of the day, we're a blip on the radar screen. We're going to end up in the ground as, ashes and dust. It's what we're going to be. The world's still going to be here. We won't be.
Right.
And in 100 years, there'll be no one who knew us anyway.
Yeah.
But I think and that's probably a callous way to look at it. But at the end of the day, my worry and dwelling it amounts to nothing. Mm. And I feel like we're wasting our own time and wasting the time of others by imposing that on the relationship. If I spent all my time worrying and talking to you about my concerns, what good am I to you?
Right.
Not that I should never be able to lean on you for something, but at what point is this a colossal waste of time?
And how do you find when you talk to clients like that, what kind of reaction do you get?
It's interesting. You know, when I put it on the table, it's not just clients. It could be a friend or a family member. Most people, when they actually step back from the conversation, will say, I never really thought about it that way. It is kind of stupid, isn't it? But they go back into the habit. They're conditioned to dwell. They're conditioned to worry. They're conditioned to look back on the past or to talk about what's not there. And it becomes their identity. They don't even know really that that's what they're doing. So it's when they become aware of it is when they kind of say, whoa, geez, what was I doing? But breaking the habit is the tough part. So going back to kind of everything you said, if you don't live this, if this isn't part of you, you don't understand the process of mindfulness or the process of Zen, or in my world, the process of leadership. You've got to build it so it's part of you, right? And so I think that's where a lot of people struggle with this stuff is they look for the quick answer or tell me I'm okay. Tell me I shouldn't be embarrassed or ashamed about this. Help calm me down as if it can just happen, but without the understanding, without recognizing that you're giving too much credence to negative thoughts, or you're validating thoughts that aren't worth validating and ignoring others that could serve you better. And so the reaction to answer your question is, oh, wow, almost enlightenment, but yet they fall back. It's easy to fall back in what they were doing anyway, because they haven't had enough practice.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does. And there are two words that you said that are important, I think, for people to understand within the context of this conversation in order to really understand what mindfulness is about. You use the word conditioning or conditioned, referring to people being conditioned a certain way to see only the past and future. And you use the word awareness and the lack of awareness of the fact that that's what they're doing, right?
Yep.
So those two things are critical to understand. So from a point of view of what I teach, my way of practice called Warrior Zen, and the reason I chose the word warrior is because this is not a way of fighting or a way of violence or a way of war. It's a way of fearlessness. It's a way of strength. It's a way of being able to face yourself and all of what that means with your back straight. Just as if, remember when you were a kid, they told you when you're meeting new people, stand up straight, look them in the eye, right?
Yep.
So it's the same when we give ourselves the space to sit on the cushion. We do the same. We meet ourselves with our own back straight, with our eyes open, and with fearlessness to do two things. One, recognize our conditioning. Our conditioning, really, all that David is an accumulation of the past, your teachers, your parents, your society has instilled in you certain attitudes. The experiences that you had, both good and bad, add to your Davidness, right? And anything that creates a sense of uncertainty about who David is makes you very uncomfortable. And typically what happens is we dwell in a kind of dreamlike state of clinging to those things that make David feel like David. So that's why in this current world, we tend to gravitate to the social media platforms where we feel reinforced in our worldview. The truth is that most people aren't even aware of that. So that's where awareness comes in. So in the practice of sitting meditation, Warrior Zen style, we sit with the straight back, eyes open, fearlessly facing ourselves, recognizing our conditioning, and becoming aware of how that conditioning is influencing our actions. Becoming aware of how our conditioning is influencing the way that we relate to the world and relate to other people. But once we begin to do that, 8 out of 10 people run like hell the other way.
Why?
Because it's scary to face the possibility that everything you thought Dave was is not true.
Yep. But doesn't that go back to what you just said? You bring me back to my high school graduation. I think it's the only thing I heard during the ceremony. One of the English teachers got up and spoke to the class, and his speech to us was more or less what you just said. All we are is an accumulation of our experiences. Everything we've seen, everything we've heard, that's what you are today. It's a matter of like, where are you going to take this going forward? So it's aligned with what you just said. And you also talked about social media and all these other influences. It scares me a little bit how reactionary people are to what they hear and what they see.
Yeah.
And some of them feel responsible for reacting to it, defending themselves, arguing a point, and then there are others that retreat as a result of it. How, again, this comes back to the quick fix, but maybe it's a quick hit. The way in which our information, it's one of the reasons I do this podcast and I talk about it all the time. We're at the mercy, if we're unconscious to it, we are at the mercy of media, social media, sales, marketing, advertising, all these things. We are at the mercy of consuming and internalizing the wrong crap.
Yeah.
And I get angry when I think about it. I do. I think, man, I'm certainly not enlightened. I got a long way to go, but it bothers me when I see good people, smart people, productive people doubt themselves or become anxious, become sad, because of what they're hearing and internalizing, and that's their reaction to it. It pisses me off. It really does.
Yeah.
You're calmer than me, and you would never say that, but it's got to, in a calm way, piss you off, right?
Oh yeah, totally. It does. It really does. It's actually one of my pet peeves right now, being in the, from the agency world and understanding marketing and understanding how branding works. I've come to understand what this attention economy is really about. And since we're all, as a nation in the US, very, we are driven a lot by our pocketbooks. We tend to make political decisions based on the pocketbook. We tend to, make a lot of family decisions based on how our finances will be affected. Mm-hmm. If we were able to make a mental shift into understanding that Facebook, Google, Twitter, Instagram are making a ton of money, not a penny of which they're paying to you for your attention. Your attention is the most valuable resource that you own next to your body is your attention. Well, there are two. In my world, I don't separate the body and the mind, but the attention is the currency of today, and there's a transaction happening right now, minute by minute, second by second, where we are being sold in the marketplace and fed the line of information that they know will hook us in deeper.
Yep.
And the deeper they get us to be hooked in, the more they get us to scroll. The more they get us to scroll and pause and scroll and pause and add to that algorithm, the more money they make. Now, why aren't we as a people rising up and saying, well, that's fine, I can buy into that, but I want you to pay me for my attention. Why don't you cut me in? Right?
Yeah.
So you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I don't even think the average person knows that they could ask that question. You know, along these lines, you know, as a parent of kids, as a young kids, not young kids, like 12, 16, and 17 now, soon to be 18. I'm seeing it more. I'm less focused on the 16 and 17 year olds in terms of their focus on social media. They've got other things like jobs and sports that are taking their attention away, although it's not completely taken away. What really alarms me, and I talk to my older boys about my daughter, is we just got her phone. And I hate the fact that we even got her a phone, but like most parents today, and I'll throw myself into that category, you in some ways make it harder to for the child to make plans for themselves. Say, for example, if you don't give them the phone, and we don't want to be the parent coordinating play dates. So in order not to do that, you've got to supply the phone because that's how everyone else is communicating. And so right or wrong, that's what it is. But what kills me is I see all this TikToking. I actually talked to a PR company recently that was talking to me about TikToking. We don't work together anymore, but it killed me inside to think, are you kidding me? This is where you think my business is going, TikTok? But my point is the level of focus on these phones and and I sound like I'm 100 years old right now, but it is depriving these children of attention and focus on other people. Everything is about me and how I look in this video and how funny I am and how good I look or how bad I look.
Right.
And how many likes I got. I'm like, what are we doing? And I think we are preying on the emotions of people and how easy it is to manipulate people. And I think that's what these tech companies understand is it's not hard to hook a human in. We're pretty weak underneath if you don't have understanding. And I don't mean that as an indictment on the human race, but we are either going to fight, which is a small percentage of us, or we're going to adapt. Unconsciously adapt to these things. And I think it's much easier just to learn to enjoy it. Say, what's the big deal? It's just social media. It's just an app. It's just Snapchat. It's just this, but we are lacking the understanding of other people. We don't understand other people the way we should. And therefore we're focused way too much on how we look in the whole thing. And how much we're liked or disliked in the whole thing. And I don't know where I'm going with it.
No, you're right. I mean, there's another word that you said there that I think is critical also to understand, which is key to what I teach with the Warrior Mindfulness, Zen Warrior Mindfulness system, is that we are unconscious primarily. I mean, if you look at, if you were to track your day, and you had the ability to track how many hours of the day you were fully aware of your body in space, of your feet walking on the floor, of your breath, of your experience of phenomenon around you, you would find that the percentage of time would be tiny. I mean, if there were, out of 24 hours, you might only spend 15 minutes doing that. Most of the time, we're locked in an inner dialogue with either ourselves or in some kind of robotic action, like work. Most work is robotic because it's mechanical. We go through the motions. We have certain tasks like that you have to complete. I hate that word tasks because it makes it sound like machines, You have a task to complete. So most of the day is spent really unconscious. So in the Warrior Zen method, I focus a lot on getting out of being unconscious and becoming more fully conscious. So coming back to the warrior aspect, again, I spent many years and still teach martial arts around the world. And I spar with some very, very adept fighters and young men and women. And, if you're not right there, in the moment, exactly where you should be, fully aware of the space around you, the distance of the opponent, the timing of the moment, your breath, your weight, his speed, his weight, then you're going to get hit. Okay? That is being fully present, being exactly here now. Okay? A basketball player will tell you the same thing. A football player or a hockey player, whoever, or even a musician in the Boston Symphony will tell you that there's nothing robotic about it. It's not a task. It's something that you will get absorbed into the flow, where you become fully conscious, not unconscious. Once you slip into that unconscious daydreaming world, that's when you make a mistake. That's when you miss a note on the violin, or it's when you get punched in the teeth, or it's when you miss that hoop, or whatever it is. Okay? So, Warriors End mindfulness, practicing the system brings you to a place of more conscious action and not getting sucked into unconscious action. So there's nothing wrong with apps. And yeah, you're right. What you said there about people saying, well, you know, what's the harm? It's only an app. Well, yeah, that's right. They're just apps. They're just a bit of fun. But when you're scrolling, if you can even just take a moment when you're scrolling to say, I'm scrolling. Mm-hmm. What is it that I'm looking for? What is it that I'm watching? Right? And just be more aware of that. You'll feel more like giving it up. You'll feel more like doing something meaningful. It's that hook that drags you into the endless scroll that you want to be aware of, you know?
So it's one of the reasons I'm doing this, because I selfishly have I'm done with the technology, even though we're using we're using a vehicle that somebody else might listen to or watch. So here we are saying, you know, these apps and all, well, if this hits YouTube or my, you know, Apple, you know, somebody's going to have to listen or scroll to watch and listen to this. But I couldn't agree more. But the reason I do it is I need the interaction. Yeah. Like I have no interest in a dead conversation where you tell me, you know, well, so-and-so's, you know, this is what I just stopped by so-and-so's house. And, you know, that's what they're doing today. And, you bought that sweater. I just got a sweater. It's like, oh, I just die inside when the conversation, not to say you can't have a conversation about that, but it's so dead. It's a dead conversation. There's nothing, we're not exploring anything in it. Maybe it's too hard for some people to explore. They don't want to talk to a guy like me because you got to get into it. You actually have to pay attention. And I would think that maybe you'd fall into the same thing. And I've said this before, you know, the whole, I don't like to see people unconsciously manipulated. Right. And I've said this before. I used to train salespeople in a previous life. I still do so today, but I'm anti sales training when it comes to traditional ways in which salespeople are taught to sell. And this probably applies to marketing and advertising as well. Is it's rooted in manipulating people around their emotions. Right. And I mentioned this earlier, but you know, some of the stuff I went through and experienced in trainings or reading the material and all that was it's designed to make people uncomfortable. Get to that point where they're exposed, where they're emotional, and they're willing to make an emotional decision. And I never liked that. And I used to battle with the company I was with because they didn't like the fact that I would get out of the material and I would just talk about what I wanted to talk about. Right. But I always felt it was such a cheesy way to teach people to make money. Mm. And when I went off on my own and ultimately decided to do some, I decided I'm going to do it the exact opposite. And I'm going to help people make a smart, sound, intellectual decision that they're aware of. Right. Not one that is rooted in emotion that they can justify later, but one where they can say, hey, you know what? I feel good about what I did or didn't do here. Mm. And I don't see enough of that. I don't see enough of that, even whether it's social media, television, sales training. I feel like if we can manipulate people into buying crap, we'll do it. And it's wrong. It's just wrong.
Right. Well, what you said there is so important because much of sales and marketing is about manipulation, but it's also about formulas forcing formulas into situations where you build a construct of expectation, a construct or a pre-expectation of the way things should be. And you have these salespeople or marketers who are sometimes almost like they're reading from a script, right?
Sometimes.
And what they're not doing is they're not listening to the customer or potential customer.
Yep.
And the truth about sales and the truth about marketing is that if you make a personal connection with somebody on a one-to-one basis and you gain their trust, then they'll listen to you.
Yep.
But then that comes down to a very big problem for the salesperson. Do you believe in the product you're selling? And is it helpful? And is it useful? Yep. You see? So this is the problem. And you know, all I would say to salespeople is that, you know, if you can't believe in the product, you don't think it's authentic, true, and usable and valuable to people, what the hell are you selling it for?
Well, yeah. Well, you know, because it's a job. I mean, if they're anything like me, and I've said this before, when I got out of school, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I lacked discipline in my life, and I lacked work ethic. Yeah. And so I ended up in sales because I really had no skills to offer anyone. So I ended up in a sales role, not knowing all I needed to do was I needed to find a way to make money.
Right.
And so I got to sell this. All right, let me try to sell that, not even understanding what that meant.
Right.
And so, you know, there was almost like a naive, it's like I fell into this and now I have to do it. Other people might strategically go into sales, but more often than not, it's not the case. But, you know, you talk about belief in the product or service. That's critical, but you've got to feel like you belong on that call or in that meeting. You've got to believe in yourself first,
right?
You know, and then on top of that, you got to believe in the team around you, your boss. If you reported to me, but you didn't like me and you didn't trust me, or you didn't feel like I had your back and you were selling, that's going to impact your ability to sell with conviction and confidence.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. In fact, you know, what is good above is good below, as above, so below. So like in organizations, if the sales director is not in the same place I'm discussing now, where he truly believes in the product, he is authentic about it, and he can instill in the salespeople that same belief that we're helping people because this is what this product is. I believe in this product because I'm authentically telling you you don't need to sell, because selling is for robots. What we are as humans, this is something really important, life-changing, something valuable. All you're doing is introducing people to the opportunity to actually adopt it themselves. If the best sale is the sale where the person buys it, not where the person is sold it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and somebody called me yesterday. They're doing an ebook. They want to provide their customer base with some ideas on how to be more effective with their customers. So they were just interviewing me. And the first question is, what are a few tips, you know, sales tips that we could share? And they went over their list of tips, and they were all good. But it reminds me of this conversation we're having right now. Without a fundamental understanding of what it really takes, the tips are a waste of time. You can give me a mindfulness tip, but if I don't live it day to day, if I don't have the practice underneath that, that tip's going to fade. The minute I get punched in the face, I'll say, no, I was breathing, Tyrone, but the guy kicked me right in my face. It didn't work. Like, I'll immediately go into that mode.
Right.
But what they
isn't that what Mike Tyson said? Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and it's funny because you talk about Mike Tyson. When not to turn this into a boxing conversation, but when Mike Tyson fought Evander Holyfield for the first time, and not the ear biting time, the first time. I'll never forget that fight. And we had a crew at my house watching watching that thing. It was palpable. Watching Evander Holyfield walk into the ring, what struck me then, and it still amazes me today, is that guy was at peace walking into that ring. And I, as a naive, 20-something, thought, this poor son of a bitch, he's going to get killed. And I totally underestimated his level of preparation, his level of awareness, his consciousness of the moment. And after those first 30 seconds of round one, and he took the punches, he's like, I'm good. Oh, I'm exactly where I need to be. And he destroyed him for the rest of the fight. Right. I totally underestimated that. But what struck me was how calm and present he was at that time. I don't know if you watched that fight.
I remember the fight distinctly. I remember being shocked.
Same.
Tyson lost,
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I had a thought. What was I rambling about right before we got on to this topic? I
don't know, because I don't live in the past.
I know, neither do I. No, it's not. No, but it's whatever. We can move on from it. But I do. I don't know where I'm going with it. You're gonna have to.
We were talking about the sales, and we were talking about organizations where.
Oh yeah. So when I was talking to this person yesterday, they wanted just a tip. I said, you know what? The key, honestly, is the organization has to have a fundamental belief that having a relationship with their customers is important. Mm-hmm. And the second thing they should fundamentally believe is we should have an understanding of our customers, not only a relationship, but an understanding about their business and what they do and why they do it, so that we can help them, so that we can be a resource. But if you don't fundamentally believe that a relationship is important or that understanding is important, you're not going to sell anything. It's going to be an exhausting job. And so all the tips and sweep the leg and just breathe. It's like underneath all of it, there's got to be a purposeful intention. And I would think the same thing applies to the Warrior's End. It's not just about, and that's where I struggle with some of the coaches that put up the shingles and all of a sudden they've got retreats and, meditation rooms and all this stuff. It's like, well, every single person needs a starting point. They've got to live this stuff. The tips aren't going to get them through life. It's the living of it is going to get them through life.
Well, that's right. And that's really where, look, in Warriors End mindfulness, I constantly tell the people who practice with me that the sitting on the cushion part of Warriors End mindfulness is simply like going to the gym. You're going on the cushion in order to build up the muscles in the body and mind so that when you're off the cushion doing whatever it is you're doing, selling cars or painting pictures or fighting in the UFC ring or whatever it is, that you're able to bring that experience of being able to face the present moment with courage, standing straight, with your eyes open, not daydreaming, fully focused on the present moment, and able to bring that to what you're doing. So that is just the same with practicing in the gym. I mean, you're not going to build, a Mr. Atlas body unless you're going to the gym 4 times a week with a proper program. You got to put the effort in. It's the same with mindfulness training. I use the word training or practice because it's not a little holiday that you're taking to break away from reality. It's a practice to build your capacity to face the present moment with courage, to see things as they really are. Now, a lot of people, like I said, they run like hell because sometimes people don't want to see things the way they are, right? Sometimes people want the comfort of their dreams or their little bubble, and that's fine. But when people are ready, when people truly, as in the Tao Te Ching, it says, when you are truly sick of being sick, then you'll want to get well. Then you'll really find a way to get well. It's the same with this world and mindfulness. No one's interested in really sitting on the cushion and practicing it properly until they're actually sick of being unconscious.
Right.
So it's a practice,
So how much of your time is spent how do I want to ask this? People get caught up in their reasons and their histories and their relationships and whatever problems they have, the suffering, whatever the suffering is, you call it suffering. And they want to explain it or communicate it in some way so that you now understand what I know and what I feel and what I think and what I've been through. And even though those things happened or are happening, how much of your time is spent not talking about that stuff and just getting them to a point where like all those words and that history, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to breathe and recognize what's going on now. Or is it both? Do you know what I'm asking you here?
I do know what you're asking. We tend to be a very verbal and cerebral culture. We like things explained to us. Here's the 5 tips for X. Here are 3 ways to do Y, right? We want the things chunked up into numbers. We want it all out in a little recipe. And that's fine sometimes, but when it gets down to it, without the actual just sit down and shut up and stop expecting things and just live in the present, just for even just 5 minutes, just expect nothing and follow your breath. That's what is the thing that I teach. That's the most important thing. Now, coming back to, my past, my worries about what happened to me, and I'm a wounded child or I'm a wounded warrior, or I've had all these bad things happen to me. Listen, I fully expect, as it is with me, that my past and my future are here with me right now in the present moment. There's no getting away from that. The problem is not pushing them away. The problem is accepting them and integrating them into an experience of the present moment where they don't rule the roost, where they don't make me become unconscious. So, Warrior Zen mindfulness practice is not about escaping from our past or not recognizing the potentialities of our future, but having them here with us, but just having them here with us in a way that they don't cause us to act unconsciously against our own best judgment.
Yeah. I've got people that I know in my life, more relatives or family, where, their entire existence is spent talking about what happened 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's like, okay, and it's an exhausting,
yeah.
It's exhausting. It's like, but that was then, and you're still living in reaction to that. And at what point do we put it to bed? Not ignore it, but at some point. But now today's here. In 50 years, are we going to talk about today, or are we still going to? I mean, what's going on? But as you're going through that, I wonder, like, how do you get people to recognize what they're doing? Getting them onto the cushion is one thing, but are they saying, yeah, but I'm on the cushion, I don't feel anything. It's not working. I still have a problem over here. My, this is what happened to me at 20.
Yeah. So I think that for people who find it impossible to sit down and practice a disciplined meditation practice as integrated into your life, 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes before bed, or 5 minutes or before in the morning and 5 minutes before bed. If you can't do that, at least find something that you do, whether it's walking in the park or, going to the gym, and actually focus on what you're doing at that present moment. So, for instance, picking up a barbell to do a jerk, a clean and jerk, right? Feeling your hands on the barbell, noticing the sensation of the coldness of the steel, right? Feeling the weight of the barbell, bending your knees, sinking down into the position, feeling the barbell touching your shins, noticing the curve of your back, noticing where you're placing your head, noticing where you're putting your weight, right? And feeling the entire movement from the bottom to the top of the movement and out. If you can do that, say cutting tomatoes. Okay. I bought a set of Japanese knives 2 years ago. They're made in Seki City in Japan. They're like razor blades. They're so sharp. My wife said to me, "What the hell did you want to buy those for? Are you going to cut your finger off?" You know? And I said, "Exactly." I said, because now when I'm cutting vegetables, I'm going to bloody pay attention, right? Or else I am going to cut my finger off.
Right.
So when I start cutting a tomato, boy, I'm really cautious about where my fingers are, and I'm right in there. Okay. And if anyone's walking around, I'm saying, "Hey, listen, get out. I'm cutting tomatoes."
Yeah.
Don't interfere with my.
These knives are from Japan. Just please back off for a second.
Back off. So to answer your question, there are so many opportunities to connect with the present moment, not running away from your troubles, not running away from your happiness or whatever it is. Integrate it, but be aware of what you're really doing right here, right now.
It's such a great analogy because I know what a clean and jerk is. And I actually had to do them the other day. I've got a little gym thing in my garage. And that's a classic exercise that if you don't pay attention, you could do some serious damage.
That's right.
So everything matters, from where your hands are on the bar to how how you hold the grip, to how, what your knees and back are doing, your head, your neck, everything matters. Right. And you can't, you're in trouble if you lose your focus. Right. Go back to the whole, there's what we want people to be, which is present. And I think we'd all be better off if we lived there.
Yeah.
But
here, not there.
Here. But when it comes to those that are focused on the other stuff, the dwelling, the worrying, the past, how do we, that's like a scarlet letter in a lot of ways, where you identify and your character is a worrier or a dweller or an anxious person. It's almost like you need to be that because that's what you're projecting and that's what people expect. So you almost become a character of yourself and you're not real anymore. All you are is you're acting out something that you think you should be or what you've been building for years. But it's almost like a scarlet letter. This is who I am. And then you limit what you can be. I've worked with a lot of people over the course of my life. I've known a ton of people, this is who I am. Oh, really? Because if who I was at 18 is what I was still saying today, I don't think anybody would want to hang out with me.
Right.
At 16, I'm not the same I'm the same person, but I don't think about things the same way. I don't react to things in the same way. I don't even process things in the same way.
Right.
And I think it's so limiting when we hold on to this stuff and define ourselves by it, maybe unconsciously, right?
Right. So I hear what you say. And what I think is that while we notice people being attached to the past and attached to that scarlet letter, as you call it, and it worries us because they can't let go of that experience and just live their life right here. Sometimes we have to step away and ask ourselves, am I attached to fixing them?
Yeah.
And should I let go of that? And would it help to let go of that? And I'm not saying that you write somebody off, but what I'm saying is sometimes if you give people the space to vent, to blow off, and you just listen and give up trying to fix, sometimes it happens by itself.
Yeah. Well, you can't want somebody to be something that they don't want to be or they're not ready to be more than they do. Right. And, you were talking about letting go and on the opposite side of this, some of the most peaceful times in my life was when I let go of security not when I let go of a negative thought. And I think of some of the jobs I moved away from, or a paycheck that I moved on from, and feeling so at peace with,
right.
I'm no longer defined by that. And some of them, I remember one in particular, I was doing really, really, really well, but I also felt like limited by that because I knew I was good at that.
Right.
But what if that wasn't there? What else am I good at? And I always lived in a state of, if this wasn't here, I wouldn't be anything.
Right.
And so ultimately walking away from the security of that was unbelievably liberating. And then, or walking away from the security of a paycheck in general. I know that sounds crazy, but you had to do it at one point. It's like steroids. It's like a shot of adrenaline when you walk away from the perception of security when it comes to, say, a paycheck. Not that everyone should just go out and quit their jobs, but I don't know that there's anything that felt better professionally to me than walking away for something else.
Right.
And not holding on to, and the reason I say that is I talk to a lot of people, and many of the people that I've worked with over the years, they do really, really well. And when I say really, really well financially, but a lot of them aren't happy. That's not a fair statement. Many of them aren't happy, not a lot, but there are a fair amount that aren't happy with what they do, but they're completely trapped by their paycheck or the security or the perception of security when it comes to a paycheck. And they can't even conceive of walking away from it because they've got a house or a family or whatever they say they've got. And I think they're just as much suffering as those that might be suffering from, say, a negative whatever in their life. I'm probably rambling again, but you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So uncertainty, right? What we spend most of our life trying to do in this modern Western culture is to make things certain. We want certain outcomes. The security of the paycheck, the life insurance to make sure that if I die, that our people are looked after. The security of insurance on our car, knowing that, well, we might crash and we may need, So our whole system is designed around creating a concrete existence where outcomes are planned for, and that gives us some peace of mind. Okay. Think of the advertising for, I don't know what insurance company it was. They use peace of mind in their tagline, but you get the picture, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
But sadly, sometimes things come along and they kick us in the butt and they tell us, hey, there is no such thing as security. We don't know what's going to happen today, tomorrow, or the next day. Yep. And as long as you keep trying to fake security, you will never have it. Because true security comes from dwelling in the present moment, appreciating the present moment, not second guessing the future. And I'm not saying you shouldn't plan. We should plan, of course, and we make, but when something bad happens, like this huge thing, the COVID-19, I mean, who would have thought, right? Who would have thought such a thing could happen in the world? People were so caught off guard, particularly countries' leadership were so caught off guard because they thought everything was planned for. They thought everything was certain. We're so certain with our strategy. We're so certain with this. No, you're not. All it takes is a little tiny germ to come along and stick its little pokers into your bloodstream, and then you're done, right? Yep. So I think it's been a great wake-up call for all of us. And some people have lost their jobs, and it's been as traumatic for them as it is for some people getting sick or losing someone because of this. But I was speaking last night on my meditation call about a word that I don't often use in mindfulness practice, but the word gratitude. Mm-hmm. And what has gratitude got to do with mindfulness? Well, gratitude has got to do with mindfulness in that when you're really awake, really woken up to what's going on right here, right now, and accepting the negative and the positive as just two forms of phenomena, right? We can say the positive is a kind of reward and the negative is a kind of teacher. If we can recognize that, then we can truly allow gratitude in, so that we can be thankful for both of those things. So turning a negative thing into a positive thing because it's an opportunity for challenge. We only grow when we're challenged. We only grow and improve when the rug is pulled out from under us. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is you lose your job, because then if you have no other opportunities, then you're forced to actually look at yourself and say, what can I do to be truly myself and truly useful to society?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's the answer. That's the answer, is looking inside, accepting responsibility, and then taking action on it. You use these words. So I put out a tongue-in-cheek post last week, and it said, mindfulness equals awareness, authentic equals real, grateful equals thankful. You've used these words interchangeably on this during this conversation as well. And then I just put a picture that just said words. I get sensitive because I with anything like there was a book that came out, I want to say it was in the 90s, called The Secret, and Oprah Winfrey like jumped all over it.
Yeah, I remember it. I read it. Yeah.
Oh, you read it. Right. I think I read it too. It's downstairs. I don't know if I skimmed through it. I read it, but it was something like, if you think something, whatever, just think good thoughts and life will come to you, or whatever you want will come to you. And all of a sudden you get all these, people around the kind of, oh yeah, that's all I have to do. And there's other people saying it's a bunch of bullshit. But the reality is, I think that there was truth to it.
Yeah.
There's truth to it, but without the foundational practice and understanding, it's not going to happen. If I go around like hurting people and then think a positive thought, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is belief, but I do think that some of this stuff, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I do it, I bucket it into everyone's parroting that jargon. I've worked with people that talk about mindfulness or authenticity, for example, and they could not be less authentic. And it's nauseating to me. So I refuse to use the word. I actually had somebody who was, and this is my own hang up, by the way. I was giving a keynote talk to it was a big group of people. I had never met those people. And one of the women at the end said, Dave, I got to tell you, you're one of the most authentic people I've ever experienced in an environment like this. And I go, can you just say real? I can't stomach that word. And it ties back to some of the people that I've met that teach this stuff. I'm like, oh, they could not be more disingenuous. And you and I have talked about this offline. Yeah. Does any of this get diluted because of the perception of these words? Like Tom Brady, for example. I love the fact that he was our quarterback in New England for the last 20 years. But he uses these words, and I think, well, you got a load of money. You're married to a supermodel. You've got multiple homes. You have no material worries ever. It's easy to be grateful, but you're not relatable. You're not relatable, Tom. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I had a friend of mine, and got what we call a senpai in karate and martial arts. A senpai means one who went before. Okay. In other words, he's a bit older than me, and he trained. He lived in an area of Dublin called Tala, a kind of a rough, poor neighborhood. And I used to go up to his house. And, they didn't have any money. They were really poor people. I mean, the people in the house next door had their donkey in the backyard, and, no one had any cars, and it was dreary and it was damp, and, and I remember once being struck by, because I came from a pretty almost middle-class-ish Irish Dublin household. But in the karate dojo, you meet all sorts of people. And I just really liked this guy. And I went to his house all the time. But he used to make lunch or make dinner. And he would fry a couple of eggs, put on some baked beans, and make some toast. And that was like his dinner like almost every day. But when this kid was cooking that stuff up, the gratitude, the happiness that he had, just when I would sit there and eat that, I swear to God, it was the best food I ever had, because it was just a joy for him.
Yeah.
In his little poor little house with no heating and no money, to cook that. And then for me to sit there with him and enjoy that simple meal was a real lesson for me. Okay. So like you say, it's easy to mouth the words, "Oh, I'm so grateful," when you're driving a Rolls Royce. But how can you be grateful if you don't have anything? And sometimes the best teachers are the ones that don't have anything. If you think of, you mentioned earlier in our discussion, you said, well, we're all going to be 6 feet under, no one will remember us in 100 years. All of that is true for 99.9% of all of us. If you think back on the people that are remembered, not just in our minds, but in our hearts, from 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago, okay? Who are they? They're not people that had money. Jesus Christ had no money. Buddha had no money, right? Mohammed had no money, okay? These people that had no money, look at Gandhi. He had no money. Yep. Mother Teresa had no money. They made life beautiful and joyous from simple things that they were truly grateful for, and that the people around them appreciated and were truly grateful for.
I think about that all the time. I think of that Abraham, Martin, and John song.
Yeah.
But the people who have long-lasting influence and relevance are those that you just referenced. And I always think about that. They had nothing materially, but they had everything up here. But the common denominator also is they were here for other people. Yeah. And I don't know if I've had several conversations this morning, and they all start running together. But I was on a Zoom call before this, and I'm being asked to potentially do a keynote a virtual leadership talk for a new organization that I don't know yet. And they want to talk on what leadership is. And I'm like, well, like for me, and I might have mentioned this earlier, is you better be getting into it for the people. You'll never be remembered if you're there to, pad your own resume and to spout your own, tout your own press clippings.
Right.
If the people you referenced were never about themselves. So if you want to have a lasting impact, if you do,
right,
then it can never be about you. It can never be about TikTok and likes, Facebook. You know what I'm saying? So I think that there's a lot to what you just said. What do you want people to hear and know as a result of this conversation?
Wow, that's a good question. Well, I think the most important thing that I feel I have to say is that there's too much beauty in the world. There's too much, truth and happiness that's available to us right here, right now, to lose it to being unconscious, to lose it to the things that take our attention away from the most important things that we have. And there is a way to do it. There is a way to protect it, but it may not work just doing it with an app. It may not work just doing it with taking 5-minute holidays in sort of very relaxation-oriented practices. It takes work. I think that it's like exercising a muscle. You got to go to the gym to exercise, or you're not going to get any results. If you want to lose weight, you have to stop eating, or you don't get results. There's effort involved in everything. And if a thing is worth having, then it's worth fighting for. Okay? So I think for me, Warrior Zen mindfulness is about fighting for reality, fighting for the present moment, having the courage and the strength to sit up straight, to breathe, to confront our true selves, reality, with courage, and then to bring that experience off the cushion into your daily life, managing teams, being a sports star, whatever it is, but bringing that with you, because the real practice happens off the cushion.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. So this is our first of hopefully several conversations. Tyrone and I have been kicking around the idea of maybe doing a series of some sort. So let's see how this one goes and how people respond to it. But I'd love to do it again if you're open to it.
Fantastic. I really enjoyed it. It was a great conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time, Tyrone.
Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
You as well.
You've been listening to Cut Through the Noise with Dave Tyrone. Please subscribe, and for more information, check us out on Instagram at CTTN Podcast.